given all this, why should we trust you to be a leader in the conservative movement over someone who values America first, like Nicholas J. Pointed? Thank you for your service. Thank you for being here. So, thank you for being here. So, let me ask the question. And so, it's an interesting question from someone wearing a Bernie Sanders shirt. So I just got to say that's very interesting. But look, I travel the country. I went to the border wall well before many people did. I've advocated for English being the official language of the United States. I do have an appreciation for freedom of dialogue, and I demonstrated by giving you the microphone to allow you to say that. And if you will look at my remarks tonight, and you will look at in the past, I have not and will not attack individuals that have certain beliefs and overgeneralize them. I will not do that, and I refuse to do that. When a specific individual says something that is detestable, I will call that person out for that. And let me say this just more broadly and generally. I believe that this country is the greatest country in the history of the world because we're able to have this kind of debate and we're able to have this kind of discussion. You're able to come up and we have this kind of civic engagement and have this kind of civic dialogue. And I have now traveled the country for 5.5 years, going to college campuses, getting screamed at by leftists, saying, all these sorts of things. And I want to say, Turning Point USA focuses on those big three things that we talked about. American exceptionalism, America being the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world. The Constitution being the greatest political document ever written. Free enterprise capitalism being the most moral, proven, and effective economic system ever discovered. And then I also went through the 5 or 6 leading things that I think a lot of people here have a lot of understandable anxiety about. Endless wars, DC getting more powerful, the college cartel, ripping students off, social media ban. I acknowledged a lot of those things, and I'm willing to have a conversation about them. And guess what? That also contributing to that is mass immigration. And I talked about that. It's not just illegal immigration, and you have 23 million people illegally in our country, but also mass immigration in the legal sense, where we have chain migration, we have the visa lottery. That does not make us more competitive, and that does not in any way, shape, or form make our country stronger in the future. So thank you so much for coming. I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Hey Charles, my name is Barney. Are you in favor of breaking up the companies such as Facebook, Apple, Amazon, most tech companies nowadays?
So I mean, it's hard to hear back, but I think you said, am I in favor of breaking up the tech companies? Yeah. Is that correct? So as I mentioned about social media banning, I don't know what the right answer is because I'm conflicted with. Look, here's the issue. I think it's a huge problem. I think it's a huge problem that social media companies have as much power as they have. That they're staffed by all far left-wing Marxists, many of whom hate our country, that they're staffed by people that are able to, at a push of a button, shut somebody up, or a push of a button decide maybe to turn people to vote in one way or vote in another. I think that can have serious ramifications, and in some ways, even more powerful than the government. And so, but here's the issue, is that we as conservatives have long, and we should, be very skeptical how we use government power. And so if there is a way to encourage more entrepreneurs, use the publisher versus platform type discussion, which I think is a very interesting one and an important discussion to have. I wrote an op-ed about it, where I talked about that social media companies have acted far too long like publishers, but they're treated like platforms. And Graham, have you had some of your videos silenced or suppressed, or you've seen people with that?
Oh yeah, anytime I talk about God, anytime I talk about a priest or a pastor praying for our great president, I've had videos just deleted for no reason by Facebook and things. And so no, I don't think anyone up here is saying that we think that tech companies should be the say-all, be-all type scenario. But Charlie brings up a very good point. What is the actual right answer when it comes down to that?
Well, and here's the other problem, is that many of the tech companies are lobbying for regulation, and that should be a huge warning sign. When tech companies actually want more regulation, they're going to use that regulation to protect themselves and to insulate themselves. So if they want regulation, they're going to use that as a way against competition. And so this is a very not secretive, but it's a very duplicitous tool that is used by the big social media giants. Is they say, oh yeah, we want more privacy protection and we want to protect our consumers. And you'll see some of the big tech billionaires go to Capitol Hill and say that. And everyone in this room should be very skeptical. is they want to use government power to then prevent the next Facebook from coming up. And they want to prevent government power from preventing the next Google from rising up, because they can actually comply with the government regulation because they are able, I mean, $100 million in legal fees, $100 million in regulatory costs, $100 million, it's not a lot of money for a publicly traded company. But for a startup that wants to compete at the highest level, that's enough to take them out of business. And so far too often you see these oligopolies and these monopolies use government power as a way to suppress competition and as a way to, in a lot of ways, silence entrepreneurs that might actually want to go up against them. So, does that answer your question? All right, great. Thank you so much.
Hi, Charlie. So I did have a prepared question for you, but I actually did notice something while I was in line, that volunteers were moving people around. They actually pushed me to the front of the line. So I can only assume the reason why they did that is because I don't fit the stereotype of someone who typically asks difficult questions. So my main question for you now is, are you censoring America First patriots because you don't have a satisfactory answer, or for your donors who don't want the questions asked at all?
So let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a question? Is that okay? Were there not 2 questions already kind of along that vein? So that doesn't sound like censorship. Guys, heckling is a tactic of the left. Don't act like leftists if you say you're conservatives. I'm allowing people to ask respectful questions, and if you have a question, wait in line. So yeah, I'm not really sure what the question is. So
the question is, you're a proponent of free speech, correct?
Right. So you have the microphone. So what would you like to say?
No, I understand, but you pushed me to the front of the line when there are people behind me waiting.
Wait.
So I was behind there. There was a good 4 people in front of me. They pushed me to the front because I'm assuming because I'm a woman and I'm not the stereotype.
That's incorrect, but thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Hi, Charlie. You answered what type of immigrant you want, but you haven't answered the ideological consequences of immigration, particularly mass immigration. We know from Pew Research that the majority of legal immigrants in the U.S. do not support the First or Second Amendment. Given that this is true, how can we, as conservatives, support bringing in thousands, if not millions of immigrants and try to conserve American values?
So, very fair question. It's a very fair question. And even the New York Times and the Washington Post wrote an op-ed in the last couple of days saying that mass immigration contributed to Virginia becoming very blue. And so, right, so allow me to finish. So, this is why I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I support the RAISE Act, why I support ending chain migration and ending the visa lottery, because our current immigration policies are unsustainable. And I think there has to be a both parties, let's just be honest with, have ridiculously skyrocketed the amount of legal immigrants and have done nothing but illegal immigrants coming into our country. I'm not as cynical as you are, I will say this. I'm not going to disagree with the analysis of what you're saying, but I'm not as cynical because I don't believe that demographics are necessarily destiny. I believe that any individual can end up believing anything with the proper arguments and convict. So, for those of you that are doing, that's a very cynical worldview. I don't have that worldview. That worldview that you have, and you're allowed to have that opinion, is that you believe that just because someone looks a certain way, they will never end up being a conservative. You're not saying that, but the people who are booing saying. I didn't say you.
Charlie, I feel like I'm being smeared. You're assuming that I'm saying it's pure demographics. I'm saying non-Americans that come here don't have American
I didn't
ideas.
say you. I said the individuals that booed and you did not boo. So, but I will say this, is that there was a proposition in California in the mid-1990s that heavily contributed to a lot of the disruption and a lot of the left-wing kind of swing in California in particular. So look, I think you bring up a very fair point. A point that, quite honestly, that hasn't had a lot of discussion around it for some time. But I am not as cynical to believe that a certain individual that does not look or come from a certain way can never become a conservative. I do not hold that view, and I will never hold that view. So thank you for that.
Hi, Charlie. Let me start off by saying that I don't think I agree with you 100% on everything, but nevertheless, I'm really glad you're here because I'm a strong proponent of free speech. I know you are too, and I think we can all agree that everyone has a right to speak, right? So, my question comes in response to some of the homophobia, transphobia, and just general queerphobia I've seen at conservative events. In particular, most recently during the Q&A section that you had at Ohio State. My question for you is, do you feel the need and obligation to appeal to and recruit from the LGBTQ plus community? And I have a follow-up, but I want to hear your response to that first.
Sure. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I appreciate your comments about free speech. So let me make my views very, very specific and very clear. I said on Dave Rubin's podcast, who's a friend of mine, that I believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. I said that. I also believe that government should never have gone into the business of marriage at all whatsoever. Marriage should have been left to the church. Marriage has always been something that was within a religious context, a church or a synagogue, so on and so forth. As soon as that came within a government prison, if you will, then all of a sudden it became something that was never intended to be, which all of a sudden included tax benefits, all these other sorts of things. So let me begin with saying that. Secondly, as a Christian, holding that biblical personal view of marriage, and I go to a church that believes that marriage is between one man and one woman, I do not believe in isolating myself and never associating with somebody that also might be a gay individual, such as Rob Smith or Dave Rubin. I believe, and that's fine, you can boo the fact that I have individuals that are on our staff that are gay, but I also I do not believe in a conservative movement that continually walls itself off to people like Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs that spoke at the Republican National Convention and received a standing ovation. Peter Thiel is an openly gay man. I also want to mention Tammy Bruce. Tammy Bruce is someone who is a favorite, right, of the President of the United States, an openly lesbian individual. And so while I hold this view that government should never have gotten involved in marriage in the first place, while I hold this view that in a biblical context, if that's the discussion that certain individuals want to have, fine, but also understand Turning Point USA is a secular organization, and I said the three big things that we talk about as an organization: American exceptionalism, Constitution, and free markets. But I will push back against the belief that the conservative movement should excommunicate individuals simply under the fact that they are gay or they are lesbian. I do not believe that to be the future of the conservative movement. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hey Charlie, thanks so much for being here tonight. I just got a quick one for you. I'd wager that most people in this room weren't blessed with family connections, netting them a six-figure salary and direct connections to the president and his family. For those of us who aren't going to be living in gated communities sequestered away from the degradation of the middle class and the gleeful destruction of everything that this country used to hold dear, immigration is not just a question of what bolsters the GDP. An immigration stance based on economics is quite literally selling out your fellow Americans. Do you have any case for legal immigration in a time where your own countrymen are struggling that does not stem from your own economic self-service?
So I'm having a hard time hearing you. So basically you said, do I have any belief in curbing legal immigration? Is that correct?
No, that's not what I said.
I'm not hearing you correctly.
Okay.
So.
I asked if you have any case against legal immigration that does not stem from economic values.
Right, so how about one where we should end the visa lottery, end chain migration, and put our own citizens first? I've long advocated for that. And the RAISE Act will do exactly that. The RAISE Act, as advocated by the President of the United States, President Trump, said that we should limit the amount of green cards to 500,000, where it's over currently north of 1 million currently. So I will give you a non-economic argument for why I believe we should limit the amount of legal immigrants. Overcrowded schools in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Minnesota, Texas, and Florida. I believe that our own citizens in our inner cities should be given precedence and preference over people that illegally entered into the United States, or people that were recently granted green cards through an overly generous immigration proposal. Now, I comment, and I will say this: one of the virtues of our country is our generosity. We should be proud of that. However, there are limitations on all things. There are limitations on resources. There's limitations on a country that is $22 trillion in debt. And our generosity, unfortunately, is being taken advantage of by the rest of the world. And so this is why I support the President of the United States MAGA doctrine. This is why I have a book coming out called MAGA Doctrine, which is, for once, instead of catering to the needs and wants to the rest of the world, why don't we talk about how in Baltimore, a part of the country that the President of the United States, publicly commented on recently in the last couple months, they could not find one person in 5th grade that was in predominant black schools that could read at the 5th grade level. I mean, they could not read in 5th grade, that could not read at grade level or do math at the grade level. And so that is a very concerning trend as a country where all of a sudden you're saying we can't even get our own, we can't even solve our own problems in our own country, and somehow the solution will be to continually grant endlessly while we have strain on resources in our country in a lot of ways. In our inner cities in particular, and Los Angeles and New York are experiencing a serious problem right now of schools that are currently being jammed, lots of public services that are being strained. And so to answer your question, yes, and that is why I support the RAISE Act, ending visa lottery, and I support what I mentioned earlier, which is, of course, reform when it comes around the entire legal immigration system. And I do want to say this, because I think a lot of times we kind of forget about it. The wall before all. We have to build the wall on the southern border, which is where drugs come into our country, people illegally enter, where individuals that, and I was very vocal about this, and I was very disappointed by some people on the right that were very quiet about it, and I'm not sure why, but you saw 9 American citizens killed by Mexican cartels last week. And the media was basically silent, and they did nothing. And that is why I believe, and I believe firmly, that the United States military should go straight into Mexico and declare whatever form you want to call it, conflict on the cartels that have been wreaking havoc on our country for so long. The cartels that run quasi-city-state governments on our southern border. The cartels that are sex trafficking thousands of kids into our country. The cartels that bring in weapons that are killing our own citizens in our cities. And so I supported the President of the United States when he sent out that tweet. And you know what was so disappointing about that? Is that the media said, oh, President Trump says he wants to declare war on the cartels. How dare you? The media was more concerned about the president's outrage about 9 Americans being killed than the fact that 9 Americans were actually killed in Mexico. This is a very concerning thing. And I would say that, and I want to compliment you. I want to compliment you for bringing the issue of immigration to the front of the line, because it is a very pressing issue. This is why I went to Berkeley with armed security wearing the Build the Wall shirt and nearly had stuff thrown at me all over the place. That's why I went down to the southern border with Art Del Puerto, who's one of the top border patrol individuals, and made the wall. I wish I made the wall. I made the video about how we need the wall, and it was completely open. And I want to compliment you for bringing the issue of legal immigration, because that at times is not always given the same platform that it should, because that as well has a significant contribution to the conversation as well. So thank you very much for your question. I appreciate it. Thank you.
If I may, and forgive me, I'm from Mississippi, so sometimes it takes me a minute to process things the right way. I want to go back to the LGBTQ plus question just really fast, because I heard a lot of booings in the back, and there's something that I want to talk about. I heard a lot of booings in the regards of Christian conservatives associating or not associating with people that we disagree with their lifestyle religiously. And to hear you boo in the back, as a Christian conservative, I feel the need to say this. I heard you boo Rob Smith. I heard you boo Dave Rubin, etc. Don't tell me as a Christian conservative what my God can and cannot do. To understand that Jesus didn't hang out with just the disciples. He hung out with everybody else. And I stand out there in the back and say, of what a Christian is supposed to do. 10 years ago, Kanye West was talking about strippers, and just last week, he brought more people to Jesus than most other pastors everywhere, and that's where you are wrong.
We have, I don't know if we're on time, but we'll keep going until they yank me off stage. Sir, thank you for being here.
Charlie, for being here, and your name is Graham, correct?
Graham.
Thank you
Correct,
for your service.
yeah.
I really appreciate that. I'm not the guy who asked that because I'm sure a response would have been like, love the sinner, hate the sin, and don't promote it. Accept them as a person, but don't promote it. But I have my own question. Given that the economic benefits of migrants overwhelmingly go to the migrants themselves, migrants have a negative fiscal impact on the country, costing over $100,000 per immigrant over their lifespan. Low-skilled working migrants lower wages, which forces women into the workforce and destroys the family unit. High-skilled working migrants prevent hardworking Americans whose degrees were earned at American-funded universities from getting their jobs in their learned fields. All of this, backed up by leading immigration economists like George Borjas and others, is the reason why you continue to push mass migration just because your donors like paying lower wages to foreigners at the detriment of middle-class Americans who voted for Trump.
This way. I think there's something on mass immigration. I'll say the last part slowly so I can.
Sure. Is the reason you continue to push mass migration just because your donors like paying lower wages to foreigners at the detriment of middle-class Americans who voted for Trump?
All right, so something about is the reason I allegedly support something I don't support because of what? Okay, got it. Okay.
No, we
so
didn't.
let me just be very clear. I get attacked by certain individuals in the center right for being too hawkish on immigration. At Politicon, I went up to and some of you guys were there, at a booth that individuals had, it was this center that was funded by a lot of different groups. And I went up and I said, I support the RAISE Act, I support any of the visa lottery, any migration. I said, oh, you are on the fringe of the immigration debate, that we should not even have that conversation. So I don't support mass immigration, I support the RAISE Act, which Senator David Perdue from Georgia and Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas have championed, and the President of the United States have championed in specific and in particular. And so, again, I want to compliment you and thank you for bringing this issue to the front of the line, fourth or fifth person to do that. So there's obviously, it's a very important issue, and I'm not discounting that, but I want to just reiterate my position that I believe in sponsoring the RAISE Act. You know how many senators support the RAISE Act? 2. So for those of you that really care about getting less legal immigrants, which is a correct thing to believe in, I hope you guys show up to every other senator town hall with the same sort of vim and vigor, because they can do something about it in the chambers of legislation. I am advocating for something that 2 United States senators believe in, and the President of the United States believes in, and Vice President Pence believes in. And so I also believe in what the President has said, which is to limit refugee resettlement and to have some sort of recalibration and some sort of point system, which is part of the RAISE Act, of how we legally bring individuals into our country. So thank you for your question, I appreciate it.
Hi, Charlie, thanks for being here. I wanted to bring up immigration as well. So if you look at voting breakdown for demographics in 2016, white Americans voted 58% Republican, and what people here might be surprised to find out is that that includes every age range, including millennials. So white American millennials voted majority Republican. If you look at every other age range of Black and Hispanic voters, they all went Democrat. So my question to you is this: when are these other groups going to start voting Republican?
Okay, thank you for your question. I'll reiterate something I said earlier, and then I want to ask you a question. I believe demographics are not destiny. I believe that the earlier observation that mass immigration, uncontrolled mass immigration, is a very fair point that the New York Times and the Washington Post gloated about how they turned Virginia into a once blood red state and then into now a deep blue state. Both of those mainstream left-wing press said that. But so let me ask the question that is an interesting thought exercise. Why do Cuban Americans who are Hispanic vote so conservative? Because so why do Cubans vote so conservative? So you're like 19 and 11. I have a question. Why is it that Cubans overwhelmingly vote conservative or Republican?
Well, in a country of 360 million people, how many Cubans do we have here voting?
Quite a few, actually. So the reason is this, and let me just say this. Cubans would be traditionally categorized as Hispanics.
Yeah.
So allow me to contribute to this as a thought exercise. Allow me to answer without being shouted at. So here's the thing: is I do not believe a certain individual's melanin in their skin or where they come from dictates exactly how they're going to vote or what they believe in the future. I refuse to believe that. And I will say this, I will contribute to this, something to think about. Not discounting your question at all whatsoever, but we disagree just on that. I'm not as cynical as you are. I will say that I believe that conservatives have done a poor job of communicating our values and going into these communities where I think that we can do a much better job of winning the Latino community and the black community. You don't think so? I do think so. This is why President Trump, who you're wearing a MAGA hat, so you support or you don't support him going into Mexico saying that we're going to win the Latino vote. Do you think President Trump is right or wrong?
I think he's wrong. He's not going to.
Okay, well, I think President Trump is right, and so thank you very much.
Hi, Charlie. Hi, Graham. Thank you for coming. Graham, thank you for your service. I do appreciate it. I just want to clear something up. I am a Cuban American, and I am white. I'm not Hispanic. I'm from Spain, but we're Europeans. I just want to ask, do you think white people are being unfairly treated in this country with affirmative action and things like that? And do you think that's going to get better or worse as we become a minority in this country?
Okay, so I think I heard the question, which is, do I think white people are being unfairly treated in America? Okay, so let me start with this, and I was going to mention it in the opening remarks. This pervasive lie that on college campuses that I have been very vocal against of white privilege. It's a racist lie and it's a divisive lie. And it needs to be ended. It is a hyper-focus point on race. It is the left trying to believe that certain individuals have some form of melanin in their skin. They either have more privileges, or some sort of privileges, or they have more access to, or higher likelihood of success. This is designed to divide us. And it is wrong, and it is racist, and it should be rejected. Number two, I'll take a broader point. Affirmative action is equally as racist. Affirmative action is racist against Asian Americans, and it's racist against white people, all across the board. And so, but I will say this, though. I'm not saying you're saying this, but I'll just contribute this to the conversation, okay? Not saying it's you, but some people, Fran, I want to talk to you. Thanks, man. No, you're good. Some people, not you, but some people that have come to some of our events previously, and I don't know if any of them are here, use the kind of white privilege lie and the affirmative action policies as an excuse to create a fringe white identitarian movement. That is evil and that is wrong. It is evil and it is wrong to create a white identitarian movement. The likes of which to believe that we are going to solve the division in our country, where the saying of our country is under the Latin phrase e pluribus unum, by creating some sort of ethno-nationalist group is evil and incorrect. While I admit that contributing to that anxiety is the white privilege lie, affirmative action, so on and so forth. And I'm not saying you believe it, but the people booing it previously in the line seem to have some disagreement with that. Thank you for coming. I do appreciate it. So, thank you very much. I answered your question. Thank you.
Hey, Charlie. Nice to be up here. Right, so the name Turning Point for me is kind of hopeful, because my family and I have watched for decades as Republicans have made continued concessions without any gains. Over time, they only lose and they never make any steps forward. For example, Republicans today have all but abandoned the traditional American values that defined the party years ago. Along the same lines, decades ago, Republicans promised that open immigration policy would not cause demographic shift. And they were lying. As it is evident today that open immigration policy does cause demographic shift. The only thing Republicans seem to stand by is an unwavering devotion to Israel. Which is shrouded in some mysticism that peons such as myself can't seem to understand. Right? My question for you is, how would you propose we reverse the trend of concessions by the Republican Party?
Okay, so first, thank you for being here. Can I ask you a question? Are you a supporter of President Trump?
I'm a supporter of some of his policies.
Okay, fair enough, that's fine. So, how do you get the Republican Party to hold their promises? I love civic action. I love the fact you guys are here. The booing, whatever, that's fine. You guys have a right to do that. I love the fact you guys patiently wait in line. I hope you guys go to the next town hall for your 2 U.S. senators and your congressmen and have that same kind of energy and that same kind of vim and vigor, because they're the ones going to D.C. that are betraying, right? I think that's fair. This is a marketplace of ideas where we can say, I agree, I disagree, we've had some of that. And guess what? I'll get to the Israel thing in a second. I think that's, okay, we'll get to that in a second. I agree generally that we've been betrayed. We've been betrayed. We were promised a wall. We have no wall. The president's done everything he possibly can to get it by declaring an emergency declaration. We've been betrayed by borrowing $1 trillion this year by a Republican Senate and formerly Republican Congress. The president has done whatever he can to try to balance the budget. We've been betrayed time and time again. So if that is your question, then absolutely. But I'll tell you, civic engagement is a good thing. And I'm going to appreciate you being here and say that it's a good thing that you guys, came here and then you wait in line. And boy, if a congressman had to answer these questions, that would be a good thing. Would you not agree? And that I hope you go to that town hall and I hope you go there and you canvass on those doors, because that's what the founding fathers put in place. So when I say the Constitution is the greatest political document ever written, part of the Constitution is citizen government. Citizen uprising, when you say this is wrong, like there's something going in the wrong direction that we have to stop. And we can agree on some of the root causes and we'll disagree on others, and we've kind of talked about some of those today, and that's a good thing. And about to the Israel thing, I'm not really sure what the question was, but you said you don't support the president's view of Israel, I would imagine.
No.
Okay, got it. That's all I really need to know. So
I would ask, why do you think the only Republicans have stood by is a devotion and allegiance to Israel?
Well, so let me ask you a question. If that was true, why didn't George W. Bush move the embassy to Jerusalem? If that was true, why didn't H.W. Bush move the embassy to Jerusalem? If that was true, why did George W. Bush recognize the Golan Heights? If that was true, why did George W. Bush, why did he do nothing when the Israeli government sacrificed Gaza? If what you're saying is true, why is President Trump, who had no official fundraising apparatus, basically leading up to the election, and was a billionaire from New York and sees things as they are and defies conventional wisdom, why is he the most pro-Israel president in American history? What's your theory behind that? I want to hear your theory why you think he's so pro-Israel. Why do you think Trump is pro-Israel?
Because the vast majority of large money donors are Jewish.
Wow, okay, so you think Trump, so what you're saying is Trump is a sellout, is what you're saying.
All Republicans are sellouts in terms of Israel.
Okay, so you think President Trump is a sellout. I think he's a patriot. I think he did the right thing to recognize Israel's Golan Heights. That the Palestinian authorities should not receive taxpayer funds. Thanks for being here. Next question.
This will be the last question.
Okay.
No pressure.
Thank you guys for being here. Charlie, this is really for you. You claim to be a supporter of free speech.
Guys, please, I want to...
Oh wait, I want to hear.
You claim to be a supporter of free speech and the marketplace of ideas. You'll go out here and debate socialists and be calm with them even when they're screaming in your face and destroying your property. But what I wanted to ask you about is your recent firing of Ashley St. Clair. She was one of your ambassadors, and she was fired simply because she took a photo with the host of America First, Nick Fuentes. He's a very vocal critic. question first?
Yeah, fine.
He was a very vocal critic of your organization, and I wanted to ask you, don't you think this is kind of contradictory to free speech? Don't you think this sends a message to all the other members of Turning Point that if they engage with critics or, the wrong ideas, that they'll get the same treatment that Ashley did?
So if I was against free speech, why did I just give you the microphone?
I just said that
If
you're allowing
I was
us.
against free speech, I just took questions all night. Let me answer the question. So that incident was handled internally. I mentioned that at a previous culture war, tour stop. And there's really not much else that I can contribute to that. Ashley St. Clair's a great person. I have nothing negative to contribute, except that we didn't fire her. She never worked for us. And we are a free speech organization, as exhibited tonight, where you're able to have a marketplace of ideas, different opinions, different worldviews able to clash on a college campus, and we had some really good constructive dialogue tonight. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I appreciate it. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. This is what makes our country so great. I hope all of you that might have agreed or disagreed take that energy and that enthusiasm and go to your local official and representative and make them feel the heat, because that is what is needed in our country. Your voice matters. We're the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world. Constitution's greatest political document ever written. Thank you guys so much. And good night.
I want to ask him, that's bet, what's his thought on that?